Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to the Sean Inspires podcast. I am Sean Allen, your podcast host and transformational life coach. This evening's segment is going to be phenomenal. I have a special guest here in Atlanta. He goes by the name of Craig, the writer of Stewart. I am just going to dive right into the interview. I'm going to read Craig's bio, but I want Craig to come in after and introduce himself to you, the listening audience, in his own way. So here we are. Craig, the writer Stewart, attended Hampton University and graduated with a degree in liberal arts. Following graduation, he relocated to Atlanta, where he wrote and produced a stage play entitled A Day in the Life that played before a sold-out audience. In 2012, he released his first book, Words Never Spoken, a memoir, in 2015. It was followed by the sequel, One Thing for Certain, Two Things for Sure, a memoir continued. And his third release, So Much to Say, a book of quotes, was released in 2017, all of which carry a 5-star rating on Amazon. Stewart is also the founder of Say It in a Card greeting card company and the showrunner for the Queen's Supreme Court online show with T.S. Madison. He is also a podcast host, and his podcast is entitled So Much to Say. Craig, I'm glad to have you sitting in with me this evening and the listening audience of Sean Inspires. Please feel free to introduce yourself to the listening audience.
Well, I mean, there's really not too much more I can say to what you said, right? That pretty much covered everything. But I am originally from Baltimore. I moved to Atlanta 2 days after I graduated from Hampton, and I was a journalism major. And when I was at Hampton, I thought that I wanted to deliver the news behind a news desk. But then once I learned that, you really have to have a passion for the news or to be a journalist, period, because, what you write changes every day. One day it could be a fire. The next day it could be some world disaster, whatever. So like the story is always different. And so you don't get to curate your stories. There's no real creativity in that. Your boss or your editor tells you what the story is going to be that you have to cover, and then that's what you do. And I knew that I didn't want to do that. And I knew that I didn't love journalism enough to move to some little small town and then have to climb my way, to a bigger market. But the ultimate thing was I realized that I wanted to do more of a creative writing. And so when I moved to Atlanta, I moved here with the thought I would just write music. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've always loved music. I have a passion for music, vocal arrangements, just production in general. And so that's what I thought I wanted to do exclusively. And then I got here and I realized that it was bigger than just writing music. That was just a part of the journey, but that wasn't, you know what I mean? That was just kind of like a pathway to like other things. Hence the book and the greeting cards and the stage plays, and, all that kind of stuff.
And it seems like you have a whole new chapter that you are now getting ready to walk into, which is one of the main reasons I wanted to have you on the show. Someone very dear to me that also worked as an assistant mentioned your name to me a few months back. And so I started to do my own reportive investigating, and I came across one of your amazing interviews on YouTube talking about a new chapter moving to Paris, which happens to be one of my favorite places in the world. But there was something really in one of the many statements that you made that really grabbed my attention, that I knew would be such a blessing and also an inspiration to the Sean Inspires podcast listening audience. The piece of information that you shared in that segment, when you made the announcement, you strategically spoke and said that you heard the voice of the Lord speaking to you as you were working out. And I believe you were riding your bike, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you were riding your bike. And you said you knew then for sure that that was your answer for this next chapter that's filled with so many new beginnings behind the door when you physically make that transition. And that was the piece that grabbed me. And I really wanted to find out a little bit more and how we can inspire and spark the faith of this listening audience to do such a bold thing, because many of us, we sit back, we think about it, we write about it, we talk to our friends about it, but we never take the bold step to move into action, to manifest what we want. So I would like for you to just unpack that a little bit and what that profound moment was like for you.
That moment felt so very similar to previous moments, but previous moments where I was led to do something, right? Where it really wasn't like a decision of my own. It felt like it was decided for me, if that makes sense. And, I say all of the time, like when I do my live streams, like I laugh and I cut up and I'm silly, but I'm very spiritual. You know what I mean? Like I'm really, really dialed in to what I was called to do. You know what I mean? Like I'm really, really dialed in. And, I'm so much closer now to seeing people as like spirits. And I mean, like, and I'm not trying to be obtuse, and I'm not like, I'm thinking more about people, human beings being spirits, like each of us being here on some sort of an assignment to do something, but we all don't, it's not always actualized for all of us. Right. Some people, like I do these things called one-on-ones where my followers can reach out to me and we do like a conversation. It could be life coaching, trying to figure out how to write a book or how to deal with a breakup or whatever it is. And this particular woman that I spoke to yesterday she's 52. And she said she was always really, really proficient with science. And she always thought she'd be a doctor. And she said even now she just has this longing. There's like a tugging in her spirit. And I write about a tugging in my spirit in my first book. This is one of those moments that I said it felt, riding on that bike that day and this idea of going to Paris, it felt just like it felt when my spirit led me to move to LA. And if I hadn't answered that call, I would have never wrote Words Never Spoken, and so on and so on and so on. So like that feeling felt so similar to that. But back to this woman, she just always felt like she was supposed to be a doctor, and and she's always wanted to do that. But life has happened. She had a daughter at 23. As soon as she graduated from college, she ended up getting pregnant. She said she went home 6 months and got pregnant. Her daughter has special needs. I think she has cerebral palsy, I think it was. So she has to take care of her daughter. Her daughter's 29, but she still has to take care of her daughter. So all of these things, in her opinion, from her perspective, from her vantage point, have gotten in the way of her dream. And I said to her, no, 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 no. And then she's telling herself, or fear is telling her, or her insecurities are telling her that it's too late. Girl, you're 52. It's too late. You missed your window. You don't have enough time left in front of you to be going to school to be a doctor. And I said to her, I said, yeah, you've allowed your fear to control you. And now you've become addicted to that story that it's too late. And because she was like this straight A student, and she comes from a family of this people, this kind of people. And she said to me that they were like middle-class Black people, and no one expected her to be the girl to have a baby at 23. So it's almost like she's so stuck at that point when she got pregnant, and you know what I mean? So it's like she's telling herself that story. And so for me, life is so right now. It is so right now. It's not next week. It's not, next year when I lose a few pounds, or, it's when I save X amount of dollars and then I'm going to have children, or then I'm going to buy my first house, or then I'm going to go to Hawaii, or then I'm going to start this business. Whatever then I'm going to do, it needs to happen now. Because you're not guaranteed tomorrow. You really aren't. And maybe because I'm 47 now, I'm thinking more about mortality. Not my own per se, but I just think about, the cycle of life. We live and then we die. And so when I was riding that bike that day, and I know this is kind of a long ass way of answering your question, but
it's perfectly fine. Perfectly fine.
Yeah, but I literally was riding my bike that day, and I was really just out there because I had been saying to myself, you have not really ridden your bike this season. and this is really good exercise. So on the surface, I went out there to ride the bike because I just needed to ride the bike, and it was just a form of exercise. But being the spiritual person that I am, I understand that on the surface, I went out there right here in the physical realm, right here on earth. The reasons that I went to ride the bikes because I was telling myself I needed to exercise. But from a spiritual perspective, I went out there to ride that bike because God knew that this idea of moving to Paris would be in motion. It would be put in motion on that bike ride. And so I was riding my bike, just listening to music and just riding. And I thought about something that I recently heard. I don't even know where I heard it. But some woman or somebody said, when you start to have dreams in another language, when you're dreaming in another language, you're on the verge of becoming bilingual. And I was like, oh my God, like that was so fascinating to me. And I don't even remember when that was. I heard her say that. I couldn't tell you where I heard her say it, what I was watching, what I was looking at. But it reminded me of a thought that I had when I was in high school. It took me all the way back to the 11th grade. And I had gone to France for the first time as an exchange student. And I remember being there. And on that third week that I was in Paris, I started to have dreams. And in my dreams, I was fluent, like I was speaking.
Amazing.
And then I woke up and I was like, oh my God. So I knew that I was on the cusp, right? So fast forward a month or so ago when I'm riding my bike, that thought was triggered by whoever that was that I heard say, when you start having dreams, that means you're about to become fluent. It reminded me of that. And then I said to myself, well, why won't you just go over there and learn to be fluent? Like, why don't you just go and immerse yourself in the culture? You don't have children. You can work from anywhere in the world. Why can't you just, like, the time is now. Like, why not go now? Like, you're 47. Like, if you're not going to do it now, when else will you do it? And so I thought about it and I kind of talked myself. I'm still riding my bike. I'm talking myself into it. I'm talking myself out of it. And I'm telling myself, like, what the fuck you going on this? Why would you're not going over there. Like, what you going to go over? Because I was just going to buy a one-way ticket. I was like, what you going to do? You ain't going to do nothing but get bored. You're going to get over there. You're going to get homesick. You're going to want to come home. You're going to get frustrated because it's not going to be magic that you're going to just learn the language while you're there. Yes, you know a lot of words, but you don't really know how to put them into sentences. And your speech is definitely not up to par. And so I was just like, oh, yeah, I'm not going. And then I said, no, you talking yourself out of this. You can do this. You can go on Airbnb, rent you a little apartment. And so the next day after this bike ride, I got on Airbnb. I found some places. And then I ended up buying my plane ticket. Once I bought that plane ticket, I knew that was it. Bought that plane ticket. And but I had also talked to one of my friends. I believe it's important to have close people to you, a tribe. And
Absolutely.
I said to my friend Angela, but what am I gonna do? Like, we're at the gym working out. I said, well, what am I gonna do? She said, what the hell you mean what you gonna do? She said, you're gonna do the same thing that you do here. She said, you're gonna do the same shit you do here. You're gonna go to eat. You're gonna go to the gym. You're gonna ride a bike. You know what I mean? You're gonna go to yoga. Like, you'll find. She said, you'll go places to eat. She said, you'll meet people. She said, yeah, go ahead, go for it.
Well, I'm absolutely proud of you for doing that. I'm absolutely proud of you for taking the leap of faith, and I can hear the excitement. I don't even hear fear or any trepidation in your voice as we're talking, that there's so much excitement that's within you. I believe that is also serving as a support to you in this new endeavor that's in front of you. And one of the things I would like to ask is, at any point prior to, I know you mentioned 11th grade and wanting to, you visited and you've envisioned, but at any point in your journey before now and since then, did you ever have glimpses of you would be doing what you're getting ready to do now?
Interesting that you asked me that. No, I didn't have visions that I'd be doing what I'm doing now. But and I'm always careful when I answer this kind of a question or when I talk about this, because this is a knowing that I've always had this. You know what I'm saying? Like I've always known, and I write about this in Book of Jewels, my fourth book, and in the very first chapter of that book is called Life, and I'm trying to trace back in that first chapter, like at what point did I become afraid to take risks? Because there was a time that I had become afraid. Like I was this ambitious person, all the way up until I left college and moved to Atlanta. And then when life started happening to me, and you get knocked down a few times, scrape your knees up, your elbows and shit, and you got to get up. Like you start to second guess things, and you start to move a little bit more carefully. But then sometimes that gingerly thing that you're doing sometimes can kind of cripple you and cause you to not move at all. And so when I was writing Book of Jewels, I was trying to trace back to the moment that I started becoming fearful to take risks, to take those leaps of faith. And what I discovered in writing that first chapter, you can't pinpoint a single moment, because it's not a single moment that you become afraid to move. It's a culmination of instances. It's, your car got repossessed once, and then you had to go down to the food stamp office, and then you had to go down to the rent court because you got an eviction notice on your door. So it's all of these things that happen that make you take pause. It's not one single thing. It's a collection of things. And then you just start to just kind of move differently. But then I had to move myself out of that fear phase too, right? And so I don't live my life now where like I'm fearful of things. In terms
That's
of,
wonderful.
but I don't want you to listen. I'm not jumping out no plane. I'm fearful of shit like that. That's not what I mean. I'm saying I'm not fearful to get up, go to another country, sit myself there for a while. I'm not afraid to fail in front of people, is what I'm saying.
I
I'm
totally get
past
it, and
that.
I'm with you. I'm not jumping out of planes either. So
Yeah.
we're on the same page. And I'm an Aquarius, and we're very adventurous people. So
Mhm.
this is, which we've transitioned sort of kind of, I would say, out of COVID. And many of us, we were put on pause, and we were put in a posture of being still. And we had to do a lot of internal work. During
Uh-huh.
that time, what was what for you was the highlight, and what do you believe was the greatest benefit that you came out of it with for yourself?
Um I really think that COVID, again, I'm very spiritual. So I believe that everything that happens right here on earth parallels or reflects something that's happening in the spiritual realm, right? So like I was saying a moment ago, I went bike riding that day because I needed to go bike riding and I wanted to exercise. But I believe that from a spiritual perspective, that bike ride happened because, again, God was trying to get that message to me. I think with COVID, yes, the world shut down because the physical the reasons that happened right here on Earth were because COVID was spreading. Donald Trump didn't do what he was supposed to do, da 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 da, and it just started to spread, right? But I believe from a spiritual perspective, COVID happened. So what happens in the physical realm is the literal reason, but in the spiritual perspective, it's like the hypothetical, not the hypothetical reason, but kind of like the higher thinking reasoning. So I think that the reason that it happened from a spiritual perspective is because we as a country, as a world, as a society, not a country, needed to slow down. You know what I mean? I think the earth needed a reprieve, because if you notice, like pollution and all of that kind of stuff kind of wavered because we weren't driving. There weren't so many cars on the road. Like I think the earth was tired. And I think that it allowed us as human beings to really appreciate humanity a bit more and realize that we actually are codependent on each other. Like not codependent, interdependent. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
That we're interdependent. That we need each other. Because people would always, oh no, I'm good being by myself. But then when you're supposed to be locked down and you have no contact with people other than FaceTime or Zoom, COVID taught us that that's not enough. That I need to sit in front of you. I need to touch your hand. I need to hug you. You know what I mean? I need to just sit and laugh in front of you. You need that energy from another human being. Um, But so I took all of that with me out of COVID. But from a business perspective, like I really, really thrived during COVID because that's when my content, my social media content really improved. And, people were home just buying and shopping. So I sold so many books during COVID. People were reading. I sold so much merchandise like hoodies and t-shirts and coffee mugs, like with like my little sayings and things like that, my little affirmations. Um, and then I was supposed to go on a tour with my fourth book. I was supposed to go on tour with Book of Jewels because Book of Jewels was released February of 2020. And COVID
Mm.
started in March 2020. And I was supposed to be in my first city in May. But anyway, I ended up postponing it all. And so I ended up doing an online book study. I mean, not book study, but book tour or book conversations, I should say. And so every Friday, I discussed a new chapter. And that really like it motivated people to buy the book because they knew on Fridays we would be talking about those chapters individually. You know what I mean? Each week. So yeah.
Phenomenal creative pivot. That was a phenomenal creative business pivot. Absolutely awesome.
Thank you.
And so you segued right into what I was getting ready to ask next. So are you thinking of creating some type of documentary or journal for public release about your new beginning in Paris? Do you have any plans to put that in writing and publishing anything in regards to this new chapter you're walking into?
I don't know. It's interesting because I literally have been like I always write, and I'm like sometimes I write and I'll tweet it like little pieces here and there, but I always save it like in my phone, like in my notes. And so like when I was a young writer, like trying to find my voice as a writer, when I was a lot more green, I used to get really bogged down and confused with what I was going to do with everything. So like let's just say I sat down today and I wrote down like something that I found to be really profound. It might have been 3 or 4 pages, or 3 or 4 paragraphs or something, or a few sentences. I used to get really distracted with, well, what am I going to do with this? Now I don't concern myself with that. I write it and I save it. I just put it in a file. Like I have a whole miscellaneous file. And like when I'm feeling really creative or like I need to say something, I look through those miscellaneous files and I just look. And sometimes I pull pieces and put it together. I cut and paste and put it all together. And then it starts to make sense. That's what happened with Book of Jewels. Like it took me like 8 years to write that book because it was years of me just having thoughts about different things. And then finally I was able to figure out how to contain it all as a book. So Book of Jewels is really like 11 of the biggest life lessons that I've learned. It's like the biggest life lessons that I've learned. And so that's why I call it Book of Jewels. It's like, I really believe that it's perfect for somebody retiring, somebody graduating high school, definitely somebody graduating college or graduate school. Like it really is, I believe it's kind of like it's almost like it's almost like a key to like life answers, like to
I
help you
love
get
that.
recentered, to like help you get recentered, like when you're feeling off course. I mean, because I talk about relationships, I talk about love and fear, I talk about dating, I talk about death. There's a chapter called Passion, Fate, and Destiny, like really trying to find your calling, why you were put on earth, like why were you put on earth, you know? There's a chapter called Growth. So it really is just like, I believe it's my best work. Now, you couldn't tell me my first 2 books because they're about my life, my first 2 books. So you couldn't tell me that wasn't my best shit. But then when I did Book of Jewels, it was like, oh, yeah. When I did Book of Jewels, I was, oh, yeah. I'm on to something. You know what I mean? That was that feeling that I had.
Absolutely. It's almost like parents in a sense. And you stating that was as if you were reading my thoughts, because I clearly was going to ask you, out of all of your publications, which one of them is your favorite? And it's almost like parents with kids. They love all of them. However, there's a certain level of intimacy and love geared toward one more than the other one, even though they would never tell us that. So I could hear how you've really, really, really caressed all of the words you've used about the Book of Jules. It's absolutely phenomenal. So listening audience, I'm sure you're listening. Please go and purchase Book of Jules. And I recently saw that you launched a new apparel collection. Let's talk about that a little bit, because therapy is very big for me as a coach and someone who loves coaching and working with individuals in the realm of transformation. When I saw the sweatshirt and the wording that says therapy is sexy, please share what was the inspiration for that, because I can't wait till fall comes. It will be one of my go-to pieces of clothing to wear.
Yeah, that was one of the ones that I love too. And I got it in red because like I really wanted it to, and I was really intentional about the times that I've worn it on my live streams. So like it says therapy is sexy, but that's one of those things where it's not just on the hoodies. It's also on t-shirts. It's also on coffee mugs. Because I like when people at work, they're sitting at their desk or in their cubicle or wherever, I want them to have that as a reminder. So like, yeah, there's therapy is sexy. There's Black man healing, Black woman healing. But those pieces were inspired really from my last relationship. You know what I mean? Because I used to say to him all the time, like, I think it's important that everybody goes to therapy at some point in their life, especially Black people, you know? And
Totally
I said,
agree.
you know, so it just kind of was born out of those kind of conversations that I would have with him. Because I do think that therapy is sexy and it takes a really, really sound, secure person to be able to really go and take care of themselves in that way, you know? So yes. And then in terms of like Black men healing, I think that, or Black woman healing, whichever, I think it just speaks to, we're on this forever journey. Like you're healing every single day. I believe you should be trying to heal every single day.
I love that.
You know, so yeah. You know, I just became really, really aware of how to use my social media to impact people. You know what I mean? To at least provoke people to think something. Because I really just think that as an artist, because I don't count myself as like an influencer, like a social media influencer. I see myself more as a writer or an artist. You know what I mean? Because social media influencing has just kind of helped bring more attention to my work. But I'm an artist. Like, you know what I mean? Like the greeting cards, the stage plays that I've written. I used to write music. Still want to get back into music. I'm producing television shows. You know what I mean? Like Derek J and I have a show that we created during COVID. We called it, it's on YouTube right now. It's called Gay Like Me Conversations. And we talk about things that are central to the Black queer community. So that was a show that I created with Derek J and we produced it. And then we partnered with Suzanne DePass, who discovered Michael Jackson, Motown executive, former Motown executive. And we've partnered with her. And now the show we're partnered with Chicken Soup for the Soul, the people who sold all of those books. They own Crackle TV. And so we've executive produced that show. So I don't see myself as just like some social media influencer or just as a writer. I just feel like I'm an artist. And the work that I create, whatever it is, my intention when I sit down to create it is to challenge what you think you know about yourself, about life. You know, I want you to walk away from my work feeling differently, seeing yourself differently, challenging yourself, stretching yourself, you know? So, and that's what I just try to do with everything.
And you're fulfilling purpose. And that's the beauty of it all. As I have researched and listened to a lot of your work and the insight and the revelation and the impact that you have had, not just in the gay community, but all communities, your voice in your words and your actions, which is most important. You're present in your work. And that is the beauty of being an intentional person living and fulfilling your purpose. And we're just about time to wrap the show. And I always ask every guest that comes to the Sean Inspires platform to leave the audience with one word or a little bit of inspiration for those that are listening, who have desires to start a new chapter, whether it's a chapter within yourself or a chapter in front of you. It may not be as big a mountain that Craig is taking on and walking through and going to a whole nother place like Paris, France. That is his destiny, and that is etched out in his destiny map. So if you could leave the listening audience with a word of inspiration, I would love that.
I think that if I could have known, if you can teach anything to anybody, I think that is to really teach people to listen to their spirit, listen to their instinct. Because oftentimes we get distracted with the voices in the world. And those voices sometimes being our family, it could be our parents, it could be our best friends, it could be coworkers, our spouse, our partner. Like, I think sometimes we get so distracted that we sometimes forget to listen to our inner spirit. That inner spirit is what led me to move to LA. Had I never moved to LA, I would have never wrote a first book. There would have never been a second, third, or fourth book. Probably would have never been a podcast or a TV show or show running for the Queen's Supreme Court. Like, I don't think there would have been any of those things. And so it's really about listening to your own instincts, because when I made the decision to move to LA back in 2011, I didn't know why I was moving there. And I talk about this in my first book. I didn't know why I was moving there. I just knew that there was a tugging in my spirit, to go back to the top of this conversation. There was a tugging in my spirit, and I just knew that God wanted me to be in LA, and I didn't know why. And I ignored it and ignored it. A couple months went by, and that tugging, that pulling just became more and more intense. Same way this thing happened with Paris. Like, that's why I'm saying it was so germane to me. And so it felt so familiar. And so there was this pulling for me to live in LA. And I said to my same friend back then in 2011, my friend Angela, I said, yeah, I think I want to move to LA. She said, go ahead. Atlanta will be here when you come back. We ain't going nowhere. You know, she was the one person that encouraged my aspiration, where everybody else, the voices in the world, were like, well, no, what you want to move to LA for? Things will get better for you here. Just stay here. Just, why are you going so far? Because a lot of times people will project their own fears on you, and we sometimes adopt their fear. And it's not always because they're trying to hate. Like, if you're starting a business, and, well, girl, I don't know if you should start that business. We in a recession. It's not always hate. Sometimes it's hate, and you got to be mindful of that. But sometimes it's just because they know you and they love you, and they're afraid for you, and they're afraid for themselves. And so they don't want to see you hurt. And so they'll try to talk you out of your destiny. But that's where you got to know what your destiny is. You know, and I knew my destiny was in LA at that point. And so that was because I bet on myself. Like, that was the beginning of my life changing. And it didn't change right away, because there was still many, many years, many cars that got repossessed after that, came back, released my first book, second book. I was still struggling, living with friends, but I just kept believing. There was just a knowing that things were going to work out if I just kept going.
Phenomenal. Well said. Could not have been said better. So if you could share with the listening audience how they may connect with you, how they may follow you, and also purchase from your store, please feel free to share right before we close the show. That would be great.
Yeah, it's right through my website, CraigTheWriterStewart.com. Stewart is Stewart. But CraigTheWriterStewart.com, it takes you to all of my books. If you want to purchase them directly through me, through my website, I will sign them and ship them out to you. But the books are also available on Audible, but you can get to Audible from my website too. But they're also on iBooks, Kindle. Amazon, but you can get to all of those things from my website, CraigTheWriterStewart.com, as well as my social media, my YouTube channel, Facebook, Instagram. Twitter. Everything is housed at CraigTheWriterStewart.com.
Amazing. Craig, it's been wonderful, and thank you for sitting in on the Sean Inspires podcast show. I greatly appreciate you, and nothing but greater things, amazing things, and profound, wonderful things are getting ready to happen for you, as you already know. For those that are listening, as I always say, as I close each segment, stay strong and stay inspired. Bye.